Welcome to my PowerPoint about meta-defining cards. Let's start with Death Knight. And in Death Knight, we have the Triple Blood package from Festival of Legends. Death Knight doesn't have many options, I'm going to be real with you, so let's start with Festival of Legends. I've talked about it before, but it's fun to talk about. I liked this meta, and people like this kind of Death Knight. Festival of Legends was a pretty big expansion for Death Knight. It was its first expansion, because it came out in March of the Lich King, so its first new expansion in Festival of Legends. And because every other class, also had a rotation, this is effectively the first expansion where Death Knight had the same amount of cards as every other class, somewhat in Standard. You had Core, which Death Knight had extra cards in. You had the Path of Arthas, which Death Knight had extra cards in. Then you had March of the Lich King and Festival of Legends, which is 4 sets. Roughly equivalent to every other class, right? Festival of Legends gave us cards like Screaming Banshee, which were insane. I remember when Screaming Banshee came out, like early on Festival of Legends, everyone was talking about how Screaming Banshee was so strong. It's a 5-mana, 3/6 undead, lifesteal. After your hero gains health, summon a soul with that much attack and health. So you would So you would play cards like Vampiric Blood, and then you would summon, I think it's 2 5/5s. It's not a 10/10. It's 2 5/5s because of the way that it works. After your Screaming Banshee, and wow, your 5-mana 3/6 with lifesteal, that's also great for fighting on board because it's a decent body of lifesteal, summons you giant minions because you're just doing things you want to be doing in your class. Insane, I know. Your Vampiric Blood, of course, is give your hero +5 health, spend 3 corpses to gain 5 more, and draw a card, 2 mana, 3 blood runes. You also had, in the game at the time, Alexander's Mograine, 7 mana, 7/7, 3 blood rune, undead, battlecry for the rest of the game, deal 3 damage to your opponent at the end of your turn. It's legendary. And who could have guessed? Who could have guessed that giving Blood Death Knight some kind of inevitability would make it, okay? And no one could have guessed that, surely. Blood Death Knight has just been struggling a lot, for a long time in both formats because it doesn't really have anything that makes you want to play it, right? They only have, Vampiric Blood in Standard as, a triple blood card, which is not great. It just isn't. Yeah, Vampiric Blood is an okay card, but as your only blood card, yikes. You would also run cards like Hematurge, which is 2 mana, 2/3, battlecry, spend a corpse to discover a blood rune. Hematurge was so strong that they nerfed its ability and all Death Knight cards to discover triple rune cards. Yeah, you used to not. So so when Festival of Legends came out, there were 2 cards that weren't discoverable: Climatic Necrotic Explosion and Bounce Around featuring Garona. But we're not talking about that card. CNE was a triple rune card, so it has 2 layers of undiscoverability, which is really funny. This Blood Death Knight deck was one of the best, grindy style control decks we've had in a long time, and probably one of the last we'll have in a long time. Grindy control decks that have no win condition, are really weak to being OTK'd, don't have that good of, options to fight for board, are typically not good. Part of the reason Blood Death Knight was so strong is because of Screaming Banshee. Screaming Banshee would let you be able to build a board. Was it a crazy board? No, it really wasn't. But when you had Screaming Banshee out and you play things like Vampiric Blood, you'd be able to build a decently sized board that, in conjunction with Alexander's Mograine and either discovering more Mograines from pre-nerf Hematurge or from Paparazzi. Paparazzi, if you don't know, is a 3 mana 3/4 discover a legendary minion, so you're very likely to hit Mograine. Using cards like that, you could whittle down your opponent and eventually win the game. They'd almost never be able to kill you, and it was almost impossible for them to stick boards, so that's why Mograine was, so strong as a card, but it was still incredibly weak to OTK decks. Yeah, you would have, 50 or more health usually, sometimes more if you discover more Vampiric Bloods, and that typically was enough to stave off a lot of OTK decks, but it's hard to quantify that this was at one point the best control deck that we've had in a long time, pure control deck, and it still sucked. It still had all the issues of other control decks. So yeah, it says a lot. It really does say a lot about how control just doesn't really, full control just doesn't really work in Standard anymore. If you want to play full control decks, you have to play Wild now, which is crazy. Full control decks actually work in Wild because, well, if 33% of the meta is just super hyper aggro, and then the half of the meta is decks that try to beat super hyper aggro, if you're just beating those decks and beating super hyper aggro. Wow, it's almost like Control is playable in Wild. Not Blood Death Knight, obviously. I'm talking about Paladin, Reno Paladin, but yeah. And we have Demon Hunter. Oh, I used the wrong GIF. Whatever. I'm not fixing it now. Demon Hunter. So for Demon Hunter, I want to talk about OTK Il'gynoth Demon Hunter. So this is like a weird one because it was really strong at 3 different periods in time. It was really strong when it first came out in Darkmoon Faire, and like it was like okay for like the next few expansions. But then it really took off in United and Stormwind when the quest line came out. The quest line would, of course, let you discount all this stuff, like your Moarg, Artificer, like your Fellscream Blast, like your spell damage if you were running spell damage, which you probably were at the time. It was just really, really good. It got nerfed, of course, to 6 mana. Then it was reverted on the revert season. But Il'gynoth is just such a powerful card. 4 mana, 2/6, lifesteal. Your lifesteal damages the enemy hero instead of healing you. You almost always run Moarg Artificer, which is a 2 mana, 2/4 mech demon. All minions take double damage from spells. And Fellscream Blast, 1 mana, lifesteal, deal 1 damage to a minion and its neighbor's fell spell. That was like the staple combo. You would run some kind of spell damage, whether it be the tradable 4 mana 3/4 that's +2 spell damage. I can't remember what it's called. It's like Guild Librarian or something. Guild Sorcerer. I can't remember what it's called. It had tradable, and then you would use that. If you discounted it, it would be nice for your quest because you could discount your quest, and it was like spell damage. Nowadays, you would use Street Trickster, which is 3 mana 0/7 +2 spell damage demon, or in the past you would use Ethereal Aug Merchant, which was a 1 mana 2/1 battle cry, deal 1 damage to a minion, give it +1 spell damage. Gosh, that's a lot of cards. The whole idea behind this deck is that you're trying to just deal as much damage as possible with your combo. You play a lot of Moargs, you play Il'gynoth, and then you give it spell damage so that your Fellscream Blast will deal what? Say if you have 2 spell damage, the Fellscream Blast will deal 3 damage to 3 different minions. That gets doubled, so that is 9 to 18. If you double it again, that's 36 damage, and it all goes to your opponent's face. Pretty decent. Typically, 36 damage isn't enough to kill your opponent, so you have cards like Unleash Fel, which Unleash Fel is 1 mana, deal 1 damage to all enemies. Mana Thirst 6 with Lifesteal, Fel spell. So if your opponent has, well, 3 minions, it will also hit their face, so it deals 12 damage. It will be, like 12 damage face. It will be doubled twice on the minions, so it's still 36, but then they took 3 damage from the Unleash Fel, and then they take an additional 3 damage from the Il'gynoth, which is 42 damage. So it's not bad. It's really not bad. This deck is actually really good right now. Is why I wanted to talk about it mainly. It's kind of the whole reason I made this video, I'm gonna be real too, is that it was of course really good. It saw play at 2 world championships. Most decks can't ever say that. Even like some of the most powerful decks ever have never been able to be played at 2 world championships. Il'gynoth really, it just was really good. I want to talk about how currently questline Il'gynoth Demon Hunter is really good. You run all the typical questline stuff. You have like your brutes, you have your wallopers, you draw through your deck really fast. You're playing the questline, so it will discount you. And if you don't know, somehow, I really don't know how you wouldn't know at this point, the Demon Hunter questline, I've talked about it a billion times. It's 1 mana. The first stage is draw 4 cards, reduce those by 1. The second stage is draw 5 cards, reduce those by 1. And then the last stage is draw 5 cards, you get Demon Render Kurtrus. Demon Render Kurtrus is a 5 mana 7/7 battlecry. For the rest of the game, cards you draw cost 2 less. You don't really care about Kurtrus as much as you care about the 2 Emperor Thaurissan procs for 1 fucking mana. So yeah, you'll discount your Moargs, discount your Il'gynoths, and it's really good. That used to be the best way to play the deck as well, as you would play it in questline during United and Stormwind, but it just hasn't been that great for a while. It has just been better to play like a full like go all in on the questline itself, playing like Wallopers, playing like Brutes, stuff like that, and then doing some other stuff like playing Tony, King of Piracy. Then that got nerfed. Then you played what's it called? Then you played Togwaggle, but then Mage got nerfed, and then you played Arana, but people kind of realized that Arana actually sucks, and Il'gynoth is just better, and Il'gynoth Demon Hunter it's just been real good lately. It's just been really good lately. It like fights for board incredibly powerfully because of cards like Unleash Fel and Fellscream Blast that both heal it and deal with your opponent's board. It doesn't need your opponent to have their own board to kill you, which is a big thing right now because most decks don't really run their own boards. It can play aggressively because of the questline, like I've been saying. So it's an OTK deck that has really, really powerful tempo options to start with, which is very rare. It's not very common for things like that to exist. So a deck like this is like pretty much a 1 in a million, I'm going to be honest with you, and it's really, really strong. Then we have Druid. So Dragon Druid during Showdown in the Badlands was disgusting. It just was. Dragons are still incredibly powerful in Druid, even after 3 nerfs to the Dragon package and 2 nerfs to Reno Lone Ranger himself, and it's still really, really strong. Of course, these aren't like the best quote-unquote cards in the deck. It's not like the OTK, it's not what wins you the game. It's just a very, very strong package that all originates from the same set, and it's just a really strong package. Splish Splash Whelp was a 2-mana, 2/1 battle cry. If you're holding a dragon, gain an empty mana crystal. It was nerfed to 1/1, then it was nerfed to 3 mana, 3/2. It's just really strong. It's a body that ramps you. Wow, whoever could have guessed that would be good. It's also a dragon, so it discounts your Fi, the Setting Sun, a 9 mana 4/12 dragon with Rush, Lifesteal, Taunt, costs 1 less for each dragon you summon in this game. Really nice for discounting Fi. And then you have Desert Nest Matron, 4 mana 3/4. It was a 3/5. Dragon, Taunt, Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, refresh 4 mana crystals. This is just an incredibly powerful defensive, like, core for Druid that doesn't really lose them out on tempo because, well, Fi costs less. Splish Splash Whelp ramps you. Nest Matron actually just costs 0 because it refreshes itself. So you have this very powerful tempo-oriented defensive core that they gave to Druid, which is something it just didn't have. It just did not have, and it's unsurprising that it's really strong. Of course, you had Reno Lone Ranger, which was 8, then 9, now it's 10 mana, Battlecry. It used to say if your deck has no duplicates, now it's if your deck started with no duplicates, so it's been nerfed 3 times. Technically only twice because 2 of the nerfs happened at the same time, but whatever. What is it? Empty the space, or empty the enemy board and limit it to 1 space for a turn. So it poofs your opponent's board. It makes them only do play 1 minion. You can only play 1 minion. I mean, if you know Hearthstone at all at this point, you know what Reno Lone Ranger does. Sorry, But yeah, so it's a super, super, super powerful defensive core of cards that synergizes incredibly well with each other, and it makes use of Druid strengths. Druid strengths are drawing a lot of cards, having really, really powerful removal card in Scale of Onyxia, which 7 mana, fill your board with 2/1 Whelps with Rush. So Whelps are dragons, discounts Fi, and it makes use of the fact that Druid just has Ramp. And Ramp is really good, even if you have cards that are kind of inefficient, like because they're really expensive or whatever, it doesn't matter because you have Ramp. So Reno Lone Ranger costing 10 mana doesn't really matter because you're playing Druid. Druid is the best class at making use of Reno Lone Ranger, not because like Reno Lone Ranger sucks in other classes, but because, well, Druid doesn't have that much removal, so Reno Lone Ranger is better in Druid in comparison, and the Ramp that Druid has. So it's just really, really powerful. It just is. Like, this might be one of Druid's strongest expansions, like, overall as an expansion. Like, the whole Dragon Druid package was like pretty good for the most part. Like I'm saying, Reno was really strong. Cactus Construct was a strong card. Doesn't really make the cut in Wild, but was really good in Standard. This might be like arguably Druid's best set, and that says a lot because Druid has a lot of individually broken cards from different sets, but not that many that were overall really strong. And we have Hunter. So Odd Questline Hunter during United and Stormwind is the best Wild Hunter deck to ever exist. You could argue it's probably the best Hunter deck ever to exist because, like, Hunter has had tier 1 decks before, but Hunter has never really had, like, a meta-defining, meta-warping tier 1 deck outside of this. Even its other tier 1 decks that have existed in both formats. So what made it that way? You were playing Questline, which at the time was deal damage with 2 spells. It's now 3, because this nerf actually was because Standard, not Wild, which is funny. It was 2 spells, 3 times, and then the upgrades were your hero power could target minions, your hero power costs 0, and then you would get Tavish, Master Marksman, I think it's called. I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember what he's actually called. 5 mana, 7/7. After you cast a spell, refresh your hero power. So, for the rest of the game, sorry. So it's Beardo. Of course, you run Auction Master Beardo because, well, you didn't have to complete the quest if you ran Beardo. You just ran a 3 mana version of Tavish, so you didn't have to have that 5 mana tax to play the Tavish. Beardo is 3 mana after you cast a spell, refresh your hero power, 3 mana, 3/4, just pretty decent. Part of what made this deck so strong was the fact that it had ultra efficient 1-mana spells that would ping your opponent. Didn't really do anything crazy, but because they were so efficient, they would tick your quest as fast as possible. That included Rapid Fire, which is 2 mana now, but at the time was 1 mana, twin spell, deal 1 damage. Please revert Rapid Fire, Blizzard. Just do it. Just do it already. The deck would probably not even be that great. Let's be honest with you. It would be decent, but it wouldn't be that great. So you had a lot of really powerful 1-mana spells. You had a lot of 1-mana spells that could repeat themselves, like Rapid Fire, and you had a 3 damage hero power in because you're odd. So you dealt 50% more damage on every hero power than you would on the regular deck, which does matter. The regular questline, if you try to play questline Hunter now, you just are lacking for damage. You're constantly lacking for damage. So a 50% damage increase is significant. It just is. What was I? It was so strong. It was like the best deck in the game at its point. Every deck that existed had to try and beat it. It was better than Questline Warlock at the time because, well, Questline Warlock did this thing where they had to deal a lot of damage to themselves, and Hunter just dealt more damage. They just killed them. So Questline Warlock wasn't even that good at the time until this deck was nerfed. It was instantly the best deck out of the gate, and it was great. It was so much fun. It was not balanced in the slightest. It was not balanced in the slightest. Let's be real here. Like, it's almost like when you only have to deal 10 hero powers to kill your opponent because you deal 3 and they have 30 health. This is, again, before Renathal was printed during United in Stormwind, and before Renathal was reverted because, well, it didn't exist. So Renathal didn't exist at the time, so you didn't have 40 health, so it was always you were dealing at least 10 hero powers to kill your opponent. So when you have 0 mana hero powers that you just fire your opponent's face, and then you have your, well, Beardo or post-Tavish pop-off turns, wow, you're dealing extra damage from your spells and your hero power. Yeah, your opponent's always fucking dead. They're always dead to this shit, the odd version. The odd version doesn't work at all anymore because it got slowed down because of the nerf to the quest itself, and you don't have rapid fire, so you just don't have spells to play. You just do not have enough spells to play. You can't complete the quest. 2 rapid fires would literally, you could play rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire, rapid fire, turn 2 and 3, you would get the quest to the stage that you could win the game, and then you would just hero power your opponent until you got to like 6, 7 mana, and then you would play Auction Master Beardo, you would play hero power 1 cost spell, hero power 1 cost spell, hero power 1 cost spell, and you kill your opponent. It was so disgusting. Like, actually so disgusting. I bring it back, Blizzard, bring it back. Then we have Mage. So Ignite Mage also came out of United in Stormwind, but a little bit later. It wasn't really discovered. I don't remember if it wasn't like playable because of Questline Hunter, obviously, but it wasn't really discovered until a little later as well. The whole idea is that you played with pre-nerf Sorcerer's Apprentice. You either play 2 apprentices or you would copy it, who cares. Then you would cycle through your deck using tradable minions, because at the time, tradable was like one of the best ways to cycle through your deck if you only really needed like a few specific cards, and because tradable minions were just relatively good. You had like a 3/3 with Rush, you had the card that would like silence, I think that was Librarian, and you just had a lot of pretty decent tradable cards. You would trade through your deck, you would have like tutors to get tutors to like go through your deck, and it was fun. It was a fun time. So you would play multiple apprentices, you would then play Elemental Evocation to cheat out a Sanctum Chandler, or you would play Luna. If you don't know what Elemental Evocation is, it's 0 mana fire spell. Your next elemental you play this turn costs 2 less. Sanctum Chandler, 5 mana 4/5 elemental. After you cast a fire spell, draw a spell. So of course it's really good with Ignite, 2 mana fire spell, deal 2 damage, shuffle and Ignite into your deck that deals 1 more damage. You would have a super high APM where you just have Sanctum Chandler, and then every time you played a fire spell, it would draw you another Ignite. You keep playing Ignite as fast as you possibly could, and typically you'd be able to kill your opponent. It really wasn't that hard as long as you played the deck a couple times, but a lot of people like to cheat and play this deck. Like, APM Mage is just a cheater paradise for some reason. Like, a lot of people like to use animation cheats when they do this, where they just don't have animations, so they can play a billion cards, and you don't need to. If you just, like, didn't suck, the deck was, like, playable, you could just play it and it was fine. I'm gonna be so real with you, no deck in Hearthstone history has ever actually needed you to animation cheat without just being a shit deck otherwise. So yeah, but Ignite Mage was really strong. It was so strong that it got Sorcerer's Apprentice nerfed. This is the reason Sorcerer's Apprentice got nerfed, not because of like other shit. It got nerfed because of Ignite Mage. So we're like always in perpetual danger of them ever printing a card that just reads your fire spells cost 1 less, because Sorcerer's Apprentice works with that. It still does. Just because it says not less than 1 doesn't mean that the secondary spell reduction doesn't just work, unless they like really hard coded it, which some cards do. But I mean, what is it? Magister's Apprentice, I think it's called, is the arcane version where it's 2 mana 3/2, but your arcane spells cost 1 less, and it doesn't work with Sorcerer's Apprentice, at least not right now, because it's bugged. It's bugged to not work right now at all. It just doesn't discount arcane spells at all, actually, like right now. It's just bugged. Or at least not below 0, even though it doesn't say that. But in theory, it should work with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where it would make arcane spells that cost 2 cost 0. It's just bugged. They might have fixed it. I don't know if they have, but the last time I tried it, it was bugged. So you get what I'm getting at. If they ever print a card that just says, like, your fire spells cost 1 less, we are fucked. Because this would still be strong nowadays. Ignite Mage would still be a broken deck nowadays. Especially because there's more ways to copy your minions than there ever was. Reverberations didn't exist at the time. Buy one, get one freeze didn't exist at the time. You basically had, like, Molten Reflections. Yeah. You had, like, Molten Reflections. You did run Hot Streak, which was 0 mana, your next fire spell costs 2 less with Molten Reflections, so, like, it wasn't that bad. It was just 1 mana to copy your Sorcerer's Apprentice because of that, so it was a really good card, but compare that to, like, what we have nowadays. Oh my lord, dude. Oh my lord. Then we have Paladin. So, early Whizbang's Workshop meta was really funny. They decided, okay, in the core set, let's add back 2 charge minions. And, you know, they hadn't really had charge in Standard for a long time. Very, very rarely. It was put on, like, legendaries, right? So they brought back Leroy Jenkins, which is 5 mana 6/2, Battlecry, summon 2/1 Whelps, who cares? For your opponent with charge. And South Sea Deckhand, 1 mana 2/1, Pirate, with has charge while you have a weapon equipped. On their own, they're not that great of... Sorry, they're not... My mic fell down. They're not that great of cards, let's be honest here. Leroy probably wouldn't see play in Standard anymore. Like, there's not really that many, like, face aggro decks that would make use of Leroy. South Sea Deckhand maybe would have seen playing in Standard, maybe. Kind of doesn't even see play in Pirate Demon Hunter right now, so that kind of says a lot. But they wouldn't have been anything crazy. But Blizzard, in their infinite wisdom, printed the card Crusader's Aura. And Crusader's Aura is a 4 mana holy spell. Whenever a friendly minion attacks, give it +2/+1. Lasts for 3 turns. So, when you have a charge minion, that means it gets to attack face instantly. So it instantly makes use of that +2/+1 from Crusader's Aura. That alone was strong and not balanced. But then you have to top it off with the best hand buff card ever printed, Painter's Virtue. 4 mana, 2/3 weapon for Paladin, Lifesteal. After hero attacks, give minions in your hand +2/+1. Not only is this card overloaded, it's a weapon, so it gets to attack you and deal damage to you. It deals 6 damage, so it's a fireball. It just is a fireball. It also has Lifesteal, so it healed you for 6 health, and it's +3/+3, which is the best hand buff in the entire game. No other hand buff card will give +3/+3 without as efficiently as Painter's Virtue. Nothing. There is nothing in the game.
And they reprinted charge cards.
I couldn't tell you what the fuck Blizzard was thinking with this. It was obviously broken. Like, it was obviously broken. They nerfed some other cards because they obviously don't want to nerf core cards that are, like, in Wild right now, because that would not be cool. Like, that would just not be cool. So they nerfed a bunch of other Paladin cards, like, because of this, but, like, Painter's Virtue never getting nerfed is one of the, like, weirdest things ever. It's one of the most broken cards ever printed. It's a common fucking card, too. So it's not like they're just not going to revert it because they don't want people to get dust, which they do sometimes. They won't revert legendary, or nerf legendary sometimes. They'll nerf, like, common cards instead. So, like, it's 3 core cards that they don't want to nerf because they're core cards, and then Painter's Virtue, which again is still a broken card. So it's so crazy that they've never nerfed this card. And then they put fucking Gilly! They put Ranger Gilly! Ranger Gilly is... I'm not talking about Gilly. I'm sorry. I can't talk about Gilly. Gilly was 6 mana and gave less stats than Painter's Virtue. Oh my fucking god. Anyway, this hand of Paladin has been so strong. It's still really strong as I'm making this video in Perils in Paradise. It's just such an unbelievably unbalanced archetype that, like, makes no sense to exist. Blizzard has said multiple times they don't like when you can have, like, burst damage from minions in charge. So why would they yank it so you could hand buff charge minions and put them in the game at the same time in standard? It doesn't make any sense. Then we have Priest. So Galakron Priest during Dark Moon Fair is one of, if not the best control decks ever. It was just disgusting. So when I say like one of the best control decks ever, you have to understand that this was a grindy control deck with no win condition. And it was the best deck in the game while Ticketus was in the game. If you don't know what Ticketus is, it is an 8 mana, or no, it's not 8 mana. It's a 6 mana, 8/8. Yeah, it's 6 mana, right? Right? I'm not crazy, right? Yeah, it's 6 mana. 6 mana, 8/8 demon with Battlecry, remove 5 cards from the top of your deck, corrupt your opponent's deck instead. I think it's the exact wording, I don't remember. But you have to understand that a 6 mana 8/8 that would remove 5 cards from your deck, that you could also get back with either Raise Dead or Yashara the Defiler, which was a 10 mana 10/10 that would return all corrupt cards to your hand, and they cost 0. So remove 10 cards from your deck, and this was still the best deck in the game. A grindy Control Priest was still the best deck in the game. That's insane. That is insane. That a grindy Control Priest with no win condition, still the best deck in the game, even though you had a deck that actively hard countered it in the meta. That's how powerful this Galakron Control Priest was. If you don't know what Galakron is in Priest, it's a 7 mana hero card, 5 armor, Battlecry, destroy 1 random enemy minion, but you don't care about that. You don't care about the invokes. You don't give a shit about invoking Galakron. Invoke is like a thing where it's every time you play an invoke card, it will trigger the hero power of Galakron and then upgrade Galakron. It doesn't matter for this. You never ran any invoke cards because they didn't matter. The Galakron's hero power was 2 mana, get a random priest minion. Super simple. However, at the time, priest minions were really fucking good. You had cards like Murzon the Infinite, Katrina Muerte, Psychopomp. Actually, not Psychopomp. What am I talking about? That's not what the card I'm talking about. It's Convincing Infiltrator is the card I was thinking of. You had a lot of really, really, really powerful priest minions at the time. So you almost always were getting a good card. You had Murzon the Infinite, which I already mentioned. Sorry, I lost track of where I was. Murzon the Infinite. 8 mana, 8/8 dragon. Battlecry, play all cards your opponent played last turn. This card was just disgusting. It utterly punished your opponent for playing cards. Which is, you know, a very big staple of, like, broken decks in broken control decks. They punish your opponent for playing cards, because if they tried to build a board, you would get it back. And if they, as long as they didn't play Battlecry cards, because Battlecry cards are the only cards that Murzon, like, kind of doesn't work with, you had a great thing. They played anything with, like, Rush, you would get the Rush mini. If they played any spells, you would play their spells. It was just, it was disgusting. And the best part is that being the player that played Murzon first was almost always better than being the player that played Murzon second, because Murzon's Battlecry. So if your opponent in, like, the mirror had a really strong turn, and then you just played Murzon, you copied it, they couldn't copy it back with their own Murzon. Then, though, like, a card that would be really good into Murzon was Soul Mirror. 7 mana, a shadow spell, it wasn't shadow at the time, summon copies of enemy minions, they attack their copies. So, Soul Mirror was also a card that punished your opponent for playing cards, which is, again, the mark of a really broken control deck, when your opponent gets punished for playing their own cards. Soul Mirror just, how do I put this? You know how, like, removal is, like, really strong, especially, and it's typically not that good against, like, large minions removal, but it's really good against small minions. Yeah, Soul Mirror flipped its head. It's really good against large minions. It was okay against small minions, but, like, it's a 7 mana card, so you don't really want to be using it against small minions. But if your opponent had anything with, like, an on-board effect that would live from Soul Mirror being played against it, you got that. So you stole death rattles, you stole on-board effects, you stole all this kind of stuff from your opponent in a spell that you could generate pretty reliably in Priest. You'd usually be playing at least 2 copies of Soul Mirrors in a real game for Priest. At least. So, yeah, dude. This deck was just disgusting. There's not really a third card that, like, needs to be talked about for this deck, in my opinion. I just wanted to talk about Raise Dead. If you don't know what Raise Dead is, 0 mana, deal 3 damage. Your hero, return 2 friendly minions that died this game to your hand. Raise Dead is just, like, how do I talk about Raised Dead? I want to just talk about Raised Dead for a minute because it's just such a broken card. It's in like every priest deck. Every priest deck runs Raised Dead. Every priest deck wants to be running Raised Dead. Every Warlock deck runs Raised Dead. Every Warlock deck wants to run Raised Dead. It's just such an unbelievably powerful card. It's effectively 0 mana, take 3 damage, draw 2 good cards, almost always. Yeah, you can low roll, right? But who cares? You're almost always hitting something you want off of this, because you wouldn't run it in your deck if you didn't. It's just so powerful. 0 mana cards are not balanced, and this is one of the best 0 mana cards ever made. It's so unbelievably strong. Then we have Rogue. So this one is very recent. During Perils in Paradise, there was a Miracle Rogue that made use of Sonya Water Dancer, which is a 4 mana 3/3. After you play 1 cost card, get a copy of it that costs 0. Tidepool Pupil, which at the time was a 1 mana 2/1. Now it's a 2 mana 2/2. Battlecry. If you've cast 3 spells while holding this, discover one of them, and a Naga. And Grifta, Trusted Vendor, 4 mana, 4/5. Battlecry, discover an amazing amulet to give to both players. The enemy is a phony version. I'm not going to go over all of the different Grifta amulets. I'm just going to talk about the one that matters. There is a 1 mana amulet that it just reads 1 mana, deal 6 damage. That's all it is. So you would play that and get it in your pupil pool. You would then play Sonya, play your 1 mana pupil. You would get the 1 mana spell back. You would then receive a 0 mana pupil. You'd play the 1 mana spell. You'd play... then, because of Sonya, you would get a 0-cost version. You would bounce your pupil with something like, what's it called? Breakdance. So you would complete the cycle of filling up that second 0-cost pupil. You would then get a bunch of 0 mana cards to then play that 0-cost pupil, get back the 1 mana deal 6 damage card. You would play it, get a 0-cost, play it again. Then you would play the 0-cost Breakdance that you got from that first Breakdance on your new pupil. Then you would play pupil again. You would take the 1 mana deal 6 option. You would deal 6. You would then play whatever spell, and then you could play your pupil that cost, or sorry, when you played that next pupil that got breakdanced, you would get a 0-cost pupil, and you had that other pupil that you breakdanced, so then you would play another spell to then fill those pools with the 1 mana deal 6. So you play that, and then you do it again, and you just dealt so much damage. It was like it was so much damage. There was like a way to like regain mana during it. I don't remember specifically. I never actually played the deck. It was just like, it was fun to watch. I'm gonna be honest. Maxi Bond won the Masters Tour with it, and everyone was joking about how like, by playing all those Pillager Rogue games, because he was a wild player, right? So a wild player that won the standard Masters Tour, which is a big thing for the wild community. Tread lightly, everyone. Tread lightly. If wild players came to standard, they would beat all the best players. Tread lightly. Came true. Prophecy was fulfilled by That's so funny. What was I gonna say? But yeah, the deck was just really strong. It made use of Breakdance, which I guess I should have put on here, not Shadow Step. I don't know. I put Shadow Step on here just because it's topical. Everyone likes to talk about Shadow Step. So if you don't know what Shadow Step is,
how?
0 mana, Shadow Spell, return a friendly minion to your hand, it costs 2 less, it's whatever. Breakdance, though, is a 1 mana spell that is return a friendly minion to your hand, summon a dancer with its stats and rush. So you typically just trade off those so you didn't fill up your board, but it's fine. This deck was like crazy because people liked to say that it was like a really, really difficult deck, and it was harder than the average deck, I will say, but to call any Hearthstone deck like actually hard is disingenuous because it's just a combo line deck. You learn the combo line, and then you repeat it. It's not very hard. That's how most combo decks in Hearthstone work. It is a combo line. You just have to learn the order of playing the cards, and then you just repeat it over and over again. It's not that hard to do. You watch like 2 YouTube videos on it, and you've got it down, or you just play like 4 games, and you've got it down. It's nothing crazy. There was a big thing, though, where I don't remember who it was, but some guy was talking about how hard the deck was. Like, oh, it's so hard to calculate all this math. And then, like, some Redditor was like, no, it's not. It's just your 6 times tables because it's dealing 6 damage. So he posted, like, an image of, like, a kindergarten... Or not kindergarten, sorry. Like, a third... When did you learn, like, times tables? I don't even remember. Like, that age group where you learn times tables, like 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I don't remember. Some elementary school, middle school, whatever, times tables math chart of, like, 6s, and he's like, this is how you play the deck. And it was so funny, because, like, usually when people are making fun of things, like, on Reddit, they're never that funny. Never, ever. Redditors are not funny. Then we have Shaman. So... I mean, we gotta talk about Even Shaman. Even Shaman's been out of the meta for a long while, since the bot ban wave. Wonder why. Even Shaman's like actually a very hard deck to talk about because of that. The bots were there were so many bots in both Wild and Standard. There were bots in Standard, but mainly in Wild, that there were more bots in Legend than real players. So it was really hard to get an actual power level graph for Even Shaman based on its play rate and win rate. It was still a good deck. Do not get me wrong. It was still a good deck, but to get an actual accurate measurement of the deck was basically impossible compared to almost every other deck that has ever existed because of the amount of bots. That being said, it did not stop the fact that there were a lot of bots that were all very relatively high ranked in Legend, so it did have one of the biggest warping effects on the meta ever. You had to play a deck that beat Even Shaman. Even if Even Shaman was actually a tier 2 or tier 3 deck at the time. Probably wasn't for most of that during the bots, let's be real here though. But even if it was, you had to play something that beat Even Shaman. And surprisingly, Hunter was really strong into Even Shaman. It's almost like when you have a 3-mana destroy your opponent's board. If they can't clear this, they instantly lose the game, which Shaman couldn't really deal with very efficiently. They kind of lost the game. But Even Shaman's one of those decks that just blows out its counters if it high rolls because of 0 mana plus 28 plus fucking 28. Genius card design, Blizzard. Really genius. So, well, if you play Totemic Might against a removal deck, oh, well, I kind of just don't get my board removed. I get fucked. 0 mana, give your totems plus 2 health, get fucked. Or if you play Totemic Surge, you could just Pyroblast your opponent. Or better. Very, very often, you would just get Pyroblasted for 0 mana. 0 mana, give your totems plus 2 attack. It's also a nature spell, but yeah, just getting Pyroblasted for not really doing much on turn 3 is disgusting. Actually disgusting. The Totemic Surge and Totemic Might are some of those broken cards ever printed, and I still think Totemic Might is hotfix nerf territory. There's no reason this card should be in the game in the way that it is. Totemic Might specifically. Yeah, Totemic Surge is strong, but without Totemic Might, Totemic Surge would be unplayable. Not the other way around. Yeah, Totemic Might was a bad card for a long time, but who cares? Plus 2 health is stronger than plus 2 attack. It just is. It just is. Not getting your board destroyed by removal, not balanced. You also have cards like Anchor Totem, which came out in Sunken City. 2 mana, 0/3 totem. After you summon a 1-cost minion, give it plus 2/+1. All basic totems are 1 cost, so it does get buffed that way. From Hero Power or from Carving Chisel. 2 mana, 1/3 weapon. After your hero attacks, summon a random basic totem. Carving Chisel is so unbelievably strong if you play it on turn 1 with the coin. Turn 1 Carving Chisel is game winning, genuinely. It's a night and day difference between turn 1 Carving Chisel and not turn 1 Carving Chisel, because just getting as many totems out as possible is huge. It discounts your Gigant Totem, it discounts your Thing from Below, it gives you better value on your buff cards, it makes it so you can... it makes it so you have a better Stone Right turn, because Stone Right on its own is a pretty weak turn. It's just a 4 mana 4... Is it a 5/4? I don't remember what the Stone Right stats are. I haven't played that deck in a while. It's a 4 mana 5/4 that just gives Battle Cry for the rest of the game. Your totems have plus 2 attack. So, that's not that strong as a turn. It's a pretty decent tempo loss to just play it on its own. So having Carving Chisel up gave you so much tempo. Just really disgusting. Even Shaman. It really was. But again, it's so hard to actually gauge Even Shaman because of the amount of bots that were playing it. Was it a strong enough deck and easy enough that bots could pilot it to Legend? Yes, consistently, and it happened a lot. It happened often, even. But to really be able to gauge its power level is just so hard. It's so unbelievably hard to do at the time. Then we have Warlock. So, Dark Glare is a hilariously broken card. It was 3 mana 3/4. After your hero takes damage, refresh 2 mana crystals. That was way too strong and wild. So they nerfed it. First ever time a card has ever been nerfed specifically for Wild while in Standard was Dark Glare. They nerfed it to 2 mana 2/3. After your hero takes damage, refresh a mana crystal. Still hilariously broken, because that actually was a buff. It was actually just a buff overall. So then they nerfed it to 3 mana 3/4. After your hero takes damage, refresh a mana crystal. It wasn't that good for a while, for a little while. And then they printed the quest line, and it was good with the quest line. And then they nerfed the quest line, banned it from Wild, all the stuff. Oh, it wasn't that good anymore, right? Then, finally, they printed Mass Production in the Whizbang's Workshop mini set, and it came back to Wild, and wow, it was good again. Dark Glare is a unbelievably broken card. The quest line's not that good. It just really isn't. Like, yeah, it's kind of good. It kind of lets you do some stuff, but the main power of the quest line is the fact that it also heals and deals 6 damage to your opponent and heals you for 6, and just gives you inevitability more so than anything else. Dark Glare is the real broken card. It is the real broken card. When Dark Glare came out in Ashes of Outlands, you had so much to do with it. Dark Glare was... I don't think I'm qualified to talk about Dark Glare well enough, because I didn't play the deck as much as other people, because I thought it was cringe and I hated it. But you just would play cards like Cobalt Librarian, which, I mean, Cobalt Librarian is also just one of the best Warlock cards ever. 1 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, draw a card, deal 2 damage to your opponent, or to your hero, so it's free, or plus 1 mana when you had the old Dark Glare. You would play cards like Cheaty Ankle-Biter, which was 2 mana, 2/1, lifesteal, Battlecry, deal 1 damage. You would hit your own face with it, you would damage yourself to refresh, and you would heal 1, which would discount your Flesh Giants, which came out in Skullman's Academy, which were originally 8 mana, 8/8s, undead, cost 1 less for each time your hero's health changed during your turn. So eventually nerfed to 9 and then 8, so you would be able to play Cheaty Ankle-Biter to discount your Flesh Giants. You would deal a lot of damage to yourself to discount your Molten Giants. It's just truly a deck of all time. Like, I think that there is no excuse for a card like Dark Glare being printed, because guess what? It wasn't that good in Standard, and it was obscenely broken in Wild. Has that story ever been told about Warlock ever? No, that's never happened in Warlock. They never print cards that are obscenely broken in Wild but terrible in Standard. It's never happened. Warlock definitely doesn't have terrible card design, guys. It's definitely not. I hate Warlock. I hate Druid. They just are unfair. Objectively are unfair compared to every other class. They just are. Then lastly, we have Warrior. So Rise of Shadows Control Warrior was disgusting. At its time, it was the best control deck ever. It just was for its time. I still think that, like, overall, the Galakron Control Priest is way better overall, but for its time, it was disgusting. You had cards like Dr. Boom, Mad Genius, which was 7 mana, nerfed to 9, back to 7, of course. Battlecry for the rest of the game, your mechs have Rush, and then it had, like, 5 different hero powers. It was like, deal 2 mana, deal 3 damage, discover a mech, summon 3 1/1 microbots, deal 2 damage to all enemies, and then gain 7 armor. I think were all the hero powers. There might be one I'm missing. I don't think so. Dr. Boom was just great. It provided so much value. Mechs having Rush for the rest of the game was insane, because most mechs at the time didn't have Rush. So you just would play mech, it would do its standard effect, and then have Rush. So it was really good. Speaking of a mech that had Rush, you had Omega Devastator. 4 mana, 4/5 mech, Battlecry. If you have 10 mana crystals, deal 10 damage to a minion. Nowadays, this card would be completely unplayable, and it is in Wild, technically, but it would be a completely unplayable card in Standard nowadays, because you don't get the 10 mana in a timely enough manner for this card. But back in the day, Warrior could gain so much armor, and decks were slow enough that you would be getting 10 to 10 mana pretty consistently for a Mega Devastator to make its effect. And boy, is it a strong effect. 4 mana, 4/5, deal 10 damage to a minion is just really good. It also has Rush, so it's just insane removal. You had Omega Assembly, which came out in Boomsday. 1 mana, discover a mech. If you have 10 mana crystals, keep all 3. And the mechs during Rise of Shadows were really good, because Boomsday had just come out, and it was only like Warrior and maybe Hunter that got mechs. So it was just only Warrior and neutral cards, which are really good. And then you had Archivist Elysiana. It was 8 mana, nerfed to 9, 7/7, Battlecry, discover 5 cards, replace your deck with 2 copies of each. So basically, whenever... I just hit my mic, I'm sorry. Basically, whenever you would go to Fatigue, you'd play Elysiana to have 10 more cards in Fatigue. The thing is that you would run Youthful Brewmaster. Youthful Brewmaster is a 2 mana, 3/2 with Battlecry, return a friendly minion to your hand to play with your Archivist Elysiana, so you could have another Elysiana, and then you would do it again by having another Brewmaster, so you'd play 3 Elysianas in a game. They didn't like that, because it kind of was really annoying that games would never end, ever, so they nerfed Elysiana to 9 mana. The issue with that is that the player going second would always win. Always. The deck was still really strong, even after Elysiana got nerfed, so it would still see genuine tournament play. And if you knew that if you just won the 50-50 on the coin flip, you would instantly win the mirror, why not? why not run Elysiana and Brewmaster? Instantly winning the game for a coin flip is really strong. And it's not like you could just pressure your opponent and win the game otherwise, because, well, it's Control Warrior against Control Warrior. How would you ever win? You would have to have like an obscenely powerful Elysiana that would get you like 5 really broken cards, because Elysiana did discover like random cards, so it was not that great overall, but it mainly was powerful because you just wouldn't go to fatigue. So you'd have to discover like 5 obscenely powerful cards from Elysiana to be able to win. And yes, it could happen, but it was not consistent. You were pretty much always losing if you went first. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me anything down below. Tell me, did you play any of these decks? Did you like any of these decks? Do you remember any of these decks? Did I miss anything about them? I don't think I necessarily did, aside from Dark Glare, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I just didn't play it. I didn't like it. I don't like it. I don't like Warlock. I don't like playing Dark Glare. I don't like playing Warlock decks. But it's still one you have to talk about when you're talking about like these ultra meta-defining decks. You have to talk about Dark Glare Warlock. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been. As evil descends from the skies, the world cries out, how will we survive? Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tomb. They grab their whips and fedoras, these legends are the